Welcome to the First Funders podcast. We are in season 2, episode 2, and I'm so excited to have my friend Andre Charoo of Maple, BC. Like me, he's a fellow Canadian. And I wanted to start about how we know each other, and then I'll hand it over to him to do an intro. So, how do I know Andre? I know Andre through a mutual friend, Shamir, who introduced us when he had just moved to San Francisco. And my visual of Andre is him running around San Francisco getting shit done, hustling hard for the startup he was working at, whether it was Uber or Hired. He was just always physically running around because he was the go-to-market guy. That's what he does. He gets things done. And as a founder operator, I had mad respect for him coming in ground zero and growing these companies. And I'd love for him to share about some of his journeys in that. But when I heard that he became an investor, I got even more excited, and with the focus on my home country, Canada. So with that, I would love for Andre, please, to introduce yourself and also share, if you can share with us, like when you realized the moment when you were more than just an operator, that you actually had an investor lens that led you to being, led you down the path to become a fund manager.
Awesome to be here. Awesome to be here, Cheryl. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to do this with you because of our history. And I love that image that you shared of me. It's essentially the same image today. Interestingly, I think people would describe me the exact same way. Perhaps just running around on planes maybe might be the difference. The background and to share and to answer that question. Look, the high level is I had parlayed, an operating experience of joining 4 companies at the seed stage, 2 of which worked out, one that was fortunate to be Uber, and parlayed that into venture. But ultimately, during that experience, I don't know if I actually felt like an operator. And it wasn't until, so this was in a span of about 7 to 8 years of me joining those 4 companies. And towards the end of that term, my network would often say, like, I didn't stay at any one company longer than 1 to 2 years. and people were like, you hop from company to company, you go find the next seed stage company, the next seed stage company. When one's working, then you leave and you join the next one. Perhaps venture might be the best form factor for you. And that's when it started to click that maybe I was always a VC. It just so happened to start as me joining companies. In many ways, up today, I feel like I'm joining these founders on their journey the same way. And so I just realized that venture is the best form factor for how I move through the world, running around, helping these companies. It's the best form factor of the spikes that I believe I have when I was an operator, let's call it. And it's mainly around sales and believing in founders before and their opportunities before other people did. And like, I was hired as their first technically salesperson. These roles were marketing, growth, product marketing, but they were all in the form factor of like, let's go tell the world what we're doing, and no one believes us. No one sees it. And this guy could help other people see it. And so I'm just now I get to do that with 40 companies now that Maple has partnered.
Wow. Thank you for that. I can deeply resonate with that personally as well. While you were physically running around, I too was hopping around, not as fast as you, but hopping around from company to company as a first-time advisor or a first advisor to many companies.
Got it.
During my time at Woman 2.0, during my time running the incubator founder labs. And I too felt like I was joining those companies on that and my stage was really like idea to first prototype.
Okay.
Right. And so I also felt like I was doing the job, also like building with them, but being a VC and that giving them feedback and guidance and then introducing them to investors and then giving them feedback on their pitch and all this kind of stuff that I'm doing today. And it takes me back because I was doing the same thing way back in the day. And so to hear you say that, I then reflected on that for my own journey, that I had always kind of been doing parts of the job. And it's very cool for me to land in this space as well, formally and finally. And so thank you for the reflection. You've helped me see this in myself. But back to you. So now you're investing out of your own fund. For some time, you were at another fund as a venture partner, but you took the leap and said, I'm going to form my own thesis. And I have some idea of how this happened, but I'd love for you to share. How did you get to this investment thesis? And what is it? Is there any other focus you want to share this stage, which we talked about earlier? And really like what makes a maple company a maple company?
Yeah, absolutely. So one correction, while I have been a venture partner at Inovia, it was while kind of incubating Maple in some respects. And so Maple's always been the core focus. What people don't know is that it started in 2016. So to take you back at that point, when my network was like, how are you able to, you got 2 out of 4 companies you joined were wins, Uber hired, as you mentioned. You were there at the times, my smartest friends and family laughed at me when I joined Uber as an example. And I got questions like, what did you see? What was the patterns? I truly believe you learn from wins. And the one pattern that stuck out that effectively became my insight after realizing that venture might be the best form factor, as we described, as we talked about, for me, the next step was why you and why does the world need another VC, and where would you focus? Your last question around fit. And the pattern that struck me that initially I thought was weird, Charoo, was like I didn't think people would resonate with it. And I think founders have the same thing when they come across an insight. And it was both Uber and Hired had founders from Canada. And while I wasn't in Canada, and these companies weren't built in Canada, the founders hailed from the country, where we're from. And I started to pull on that thread. That thread led me to the C100, which I know you're familiar with as well, and became the co-chair over time. But it led me, I started to notice an even greater pattern, which was that in any category you can name in tech, one of the biggest winners, 1 to 3, maybe top 3 biggest winners in that category happen to have the same DNA pattern. It's like you can't make this up. Like it's not a coincidence. Uber, Slack, Instacart, Notion, Fair, Databricks, Cloudflare, Roblox, Ethereum, Moderna Health, friggin' OpenAI. Like you just can't make this up. And this was a time when my peers were spitting out to create funds to back other networks. Take the OGs at Uber. Let's back the Uber alum. Let's back the Airbnb alumni. And we're going to all create this like PayPal mafia type idea. And I was like, I see a network that I don't think other people see, that I happen to be uniquely part of and can understand, that produces wins that are bigger than any one company's alumni network. And that kind of possessed me at Insight. And as I started to talk to that network and uncover their stories, I basically realized that the common thread was the talent coming out of the Canadian schools. Let's even take it one step deeper than just from Canada, particularly folks graduating from the Canadian universities and colleges. I realized that they produce Ivy League quality education, effectively. But when they move to the United States, they are not viewed that way. They are overlooked and underestimated at the earliest stages. And reflecting on my own journey leaving Canada, don't hold this against me. I started my career as a douchebag investment banker to start before I got into this tech stuff. And I was hired in an analyst class of 100, and I was only Canadian. And at the time, maybe it's 22 years, like no one had heard of the University of Toronto, unfortunately. And I was instantly overlooked and underestimated until I shipped my work product. When they saw the work product, all of a sudden it was like, whoa, wow, you're good. And years later, I just learned that that was the same for founders from Canada, from these schools. At the earliest stages, they were overlooked and underestimated. And until their work product showed up, until they shipped the product, whatever, then the market got to consensus. And I was like, gosh, I know the quality coming out of those places. I could underwrite those people faster than my teams. And so that's when I asked myself in 2016, what if there was a fund that was waving the Canadian flag, hence the name Maple VC? But what if it was ironically not based in Canada? Could I capture this pipeline of expats? Almost as like, if you mentioned this about me earlier, and I appreciate this description, like, is effectively my go-to-market strategy. Like, at the end of the day, I just want to be the best VC that I'd possibly be at the earliest stages where I think I spike. But I had this insight that was unique to me, and this pipeline that I could use as my go-to-market that was like my wedge in, like any business, right? You're like, what's your go-to-market? What's your wedge in? What's your niche? Where are you going to get a monopoly first? And then you can use that to matter to a larger audience or expand beyond that. And that was my edge. It was like, okay, let's back these Canadian expats, and they're going to lead me to the promised land. They're going to, and there's a high probability, even a high at bat to home run ratio over other networks that which is, I think, important in venture in this sport, that could get me to the next important companies. And so I'm proud to say, right, like my first unicorn with Clay was a 1 out of 9 in that first fund, as 11% seat to unicorn rate, which hopefully puts me in a different class. But it wasn't. It was all part of the strategy, and which we can get into. And so on a high level, to answer the last question around fit, we aim to be the first believer, the first check VC at a pre-seed or seed stage that believes in founders before the world does. And our go-to-market was, let's start with founders from Canada because we can uniquely underwrite them. And we know how to believe in them because we're from there. But we think those characteristics apply to a whole host of other pipelines and and areas. And I believe I'm a global citizen, and I will eventually start uncovering other networks, which we can talk about a few that are starting to emerge in the Maple story. Yeah.
Oh my. Wow, that's juicy. Um, on the Canadian thing though, I went through the same thing, of course, right? I landed and I'm like, I went to the University of Western Ontario. They're like, where? I'm like, Harvard of the North? Have you heard that term for Ivy? For the undergrad business
I
program?
actually heard McGill is more of the Harvard of Canada, but I don't know. Like the challenge. This is the challenge we have in Canada. No
Yeah.
one cares.
No one cares. No one cares. Exactly. That was it. I literally saw people's eyes glaze over. They're like, "Where are you from?" Like, and that's nice. And I'm like, "I went to a case-based business school. I know a thing or two." And no, it doesn't matter. In those early days,
In the
I
early
felt
days.
that a lot, and I felt the same thing that when I finally produced, people were like, "Oh, okay, you know what to do." And I also remember in my first year being here, uncovering the similar thing. Garrett Camp had put out Stumble Upon during that time.
Yes.
And I was like, that's amazing. If he can do it, I can do it. Then I met Michelle, who was starting Cloudflare.
Yes.
And I was like, she can do it. I can do it. Amazing, right?
There's so
It
many.
was
There's
just
so many examples.
so many examples in those early days that for me, were huge inspirations to come and to stay, by the way. So good job uncovering an overlooked and highly alpha driving cohort of, or even like pool of talent. What is it about Canadians? I know you and I are obviously amazing,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
what do you think it is that makes us such alpha drivers in the most important companies of our time?
So one, I do think it's that education piece. I do think, just imagine the whole country is educated at the Ivy level. Like they really are. Um, so education's a baseline that is actually really incredibly important. And also I think not looked upon as much or talked about, but like the quality of the education coming out of those institutions can stand the test of time against others. One quick example, I taught, one of my last courses at University of Toronto was a course called The Economics of Entrepreneurship, taught by a gentleman by the name of Reza Satchu, who started something called Next Canada, Invest, and sold it, went to the US, was educated at McGill, went to the US, started a career in banking, and then ultimately went to HBS, started a company, sold it for $1 billion, came back to Canada, and was like, man, if I can influence entrepreneurship at the undergraduate stage, you know, what could be the possibilities? He today is the most popular professor at HBS, and teaches 22 years later, effectively the same course. It's called the Founder's Mindset now. And I am an executive fellow at HBS because of him. Backing now, you wouldn't think founders from Harvard are overlooked and underestimated, but let me tell you, at the earliest stages, they very much are. All did a podcast literally shitting on founders coming out of HBS, and I am now backing founders out of HBS because of this Canadian professor who is effectively teaching the exact same course. How is that possible? And it really influenced my entrepreneurial journey. I owe that to him. He says he owes the fact that the class went well and the fact that he's now at HBS to his first 36 students, which I was proud to be one of. But that's like an example that like the quality of the course material like is the same. That's one. The second, if you then have cohort of folks, maybe you could think of it as like double immigration. We all kind of know, like the immigrant mentality is like crazy founder DNA. That's a good signal, let's call it. But you have that twice. Most of the population in Canada it has form of immigration. I would argue as a country, and then you get the cohort of folks who leave. And while we are physically close to each other and our neighbors, it's equally as hard to get to the United States than someone in another country that's much farther away on the other side of the world. People don't know that. And so the grit required to decide, almost to like, it's like a mentality shift, right? Like I'm leaving, almost like net a better country, um, to go to pursue this dream, drives a chip on one's shoulder that I think is it starts, you can quickly check the boxes around the soft skills that you would want to be underwriting as an investor to a founder that drives them. And then maybe the last one is, I think Canadians are some of the most ambitious people. And there is a narrative inside Canada that we're not as ambitious. And I just think that's not true. I think the challenge is our job as investors, and I believe my job is it's bridging the gap of ambition. So like, can you find someone as ambitious as you to go on this journey together? That is hard to find. And this is why a large part of them leave to go find their counterparts in all centers of ambition. Hollywood, biggest directors of all time. We know the names: James Cameron, actors, Ryan Reynolds. Like there's like a plethora. And finance, I don't know if you know this, Warren Buffett's successor is going to be a guy named Greg Abel, who went to the University of Calgary, from Calgary, right? Like he's going to be Warren Buffett's successor. You have academia, the highest chancellor, vice chancellor of Cambridge, I believe, Stephen too. Like it is Canadian. Like, so they'll find their, in all industries, and of course we listed the tech ones, they are in search of meeting someone equally as ambitious to them on their journey. And if they met those people in Canada, then they would stay. And that's the pursuit that they're on. And I believe ambition is a competitive asset. And it's purest at the earliest stages, when they're actually overlooked and underestimated. So finding someone to match that ambition is actually quite hard. And that's the gap that I believe I'm trying to fill it.
Wow. Yeah. That is why I left. Everything you described, right? I wanted to look for the ambition and the big vision. And when you think of the industry, right, that during our time when we graduated from college, yes, there's tech available in Canada now, but not in the same way. And there's hardly any venture capital to match the ambition that you're talking about. Like, who is going to fund me,
Correct.
right? And who is going to back my ambition? Just, it's starting to bubble, but the
Correct.
system is ingrained here. It started here. The culture is here. The risk-taking, comfort is here. And so, yeah, when I landed in the Bay Area, I immediately felt at home. Like the way people were talking to me about possibility and trying things and then actually doing them, right? And then following that up with growth, like I saw people make things happen, and that's what I wanted to be around. So I feel it. I love it. Tactically, you come in at what stage? What size checks do you write? Do you have any industry focus or not?
Industry, sector, theme, agnostic. All agnostic. I will write checks to global founders. And from a check size perspective, we are now writing checks between $500K and $1.5 million. The average is about 1.25. And, we are collaborative. We want to be that first believer that can catalyze you. What I realized in the journey since 2016, even when the checks started small, because my first fund was small, I was the first believer. And you start to get confident and comfortable in that, even when the check was small. But you realize that you couldn't make that much of an impact in terms of getting them into business, et cetera. And so now I can get a founder into business who needs to raise $500K to $3 million, is sort of from a round size perspective, I can put them in business, and I ultimately want to play up to like, it sounds like these seed rounds aren't changing from like a $5 million seed round, and so that's, I want to be able to put someone in business, and some folks do raise the pre-seed, some folks just go to the seed, and I want to be able to, again, be the first believer before the world is, and it means I'll have to play in both buckets. Um, but yeah, that's the general gist of it.
I love it. And then we're totally, I want to keep going, but you hinted on something. You're like uncovering new areas. So the current focus is this range of check size, being the first believer in teams that have at least one Canadian founder. What are you uncovering about the next group of people that we should know about?
It's like any business, right? Our first go to market was, let's focus on uh, this pipeline of Canadian expats, anyone who went to these schools, who left, and even who stayed. Like some of our companies are in Canada. What I did notice about the ones in Canada, take Shopify, which I did mention and should get airtime, right? It should be listed in the list, but it's the obvious one because it's homegrown and built inside the country. But when I studied that one, like at the early stages, there were no Canadian backers, at the seed stage, and that surprised me when I learned that. And I learned that those backers came from the Valley as well. And so I realized, by positioning Maple outside of Canada, we actually might see the best inside Canada. And that has turned out to be, in our results, in a company called Neo Financial in Calgary, where we were one of the first as well. And while it's serving a Canadian audience, it's building Canada's next big bank. There are no Canadian on the cap table. And it's fascinating that it's still playing out to this day, similar to the Shopify story. They come in a little bit later, and that's great. But again, they're even overlooked and underestimated inside their own country, which is fascinating. And so while that will always be the core pipeline and of talent that we're most familiar with, and it's where our roots are, the network of Canadian expats has given us wedges into other markets and networks, right? I think I'm basically a network-based investor in many ways, and I'm like mining these networks that I believe are overlooked and underestimated. And I think there's a lot of gems of those networks, but you got to get to know the network. I happen to know the network because of birth and growing up in the Canadian network. But as I alluded to, I am mining the Harvard Business School and Harvard network in general at the moment as well. We've written some checks there because of this Canadian expat professor that has given us access. And I didn't go to Harvard. I have a cousin who did, but I'm getting to learn what it's like to back that pipeline of founder at the earliest stages, which sounds strange, but because of the brand that Harvard represents, but I think are also overlooked and underestimated in a tech industry perspective in starting a company. And so that's one pocket. We've written some checks globally, and I'm actually calling you from Korea. My wife happens to be Korean, and while a personal connection is to the country, when we first set out to back Canadians, expat, while the initial focus was the United States, we were still open to this idea, like, we'll back Canadians globally. And one of our LPs wanted to test me on that, and we're like, how far would you back the Canadians? I've got a Korean Canadian. And I was like, send them my way. Like, what do you mean I married a Korean? Like, I'm even more interested. I'm like married into the culture. And yeah, we backed this Korean Canadian founder actually well before I physically moved to the country. And that's turning out, it's a tenant in the portfolio at the moment. It's turning out to potentially be a really important company in the Asia Pacific region. And again, it's like proving the thesis that in any market, we can wedge ourselves in through the Canadian expat network and story. And then those companies, when we hopefully, the wins that come out of that network will earn us the right to partner with the best founders in that network, regardless, period. Right. And so we're starting to see some of the best founders and some of the best engineers, some of the best folks coming out of Korea. We're starting to see some of the best stuff out of HBS. We could talk about my first unicorn with Clay, but like Clay's earning us the right to partner with any AI application founder, like period. Like I don't care where you're from. They're just like, you're the first tech Clay. Like what? Right? How do I partner with you? And so that was always the thesis. The go-to-market, the wedge, focus on the Canadian. They're going to get us into the most important companies like the next Ubers, Slacks, OpenAIs, and then those companies are going to earn us the right to partner with whoever we want to partner with in the future.
Brilliant. It's so brilliant. And would you say that the Canadians, like, I don't know about you, but when I think about that, what you said, like Canadians, wherever they are, and then following that thread and earning the right to just,
Yes.
make investments in that region, like, what are we like? Like, I know that when I meet another Canadian, there's automatic trust and automatic desire to help each other. Do you experience, like, I get excited. I'm like, where are you from? Like, let's talk about it. We're out the country.
Yes. And by the way, it's a good point, because in pitching this insight to LPs, our funders, who might not appreciate or understand it, it is something that people see that we have that people don't see and understand unless you're part of it. And so it truly is a belief that I have that other people don't have. And it's been a journey to convince them that there is instant connection, that there's many levels that I can get to connect with a founder the way that you need to connect with them to be their first believer and for them to want you to be their first believer. And oftentimes I think when the best businesses start and they break out, when you look at where they started, they actually just happen to start in an area or a place that is unique to the founder, where you can establish trust fast, where you can get sales off the ground, where there's like some unfair advantage. And we have this unfair advantage as Canadians when we meet each other to just get to that place that a lot of people would die to get to, and it would take a lot longer to get to. We could just get there a lot faster, and that helps. And it was like an unfair advantage that I leaned into to get Maple off the ground. And,
I love it.
And it is real. We'll always have it. You got to always find other unfair advantages, but you start to earn other parts of that. The stories that, the wins, the results start to earn you other unfair advantages that you can unlock, right?
Totally.
Which I'm starting to unlock with HBS and Clay and Korea.
I want to talk about Clay. Okay.
Let's do it.
So I want to talk about Clay and spend the rest of our time on where you see opportunities in AI. Okay. Tell us the story. How did you find this company? What made you invest? Like everything. Okay, maybe not everything because we don't have time. But
no. But through the Canadian expat network, right? So a guy named Michael Hirschfield, you might even know.
Sounds familiar.
From Vancouver. We've now backed his company, but he was at a company called Sail Through, which the founders of Clay had sold their first company to. And he's like, dude, you got to spend time with these cats. They're going to leave and start another company. And I'm like, duh, thank you for letting me know. Like, that's how I met them through, and how I meet any company that I, frankly, have invested in is through another Canadian expat, and spend time with them, and a lot of time. And they shared this ambition around, and really when I now think about the 3 top things I'm looking for in any opportunity and founder to join them on their journey, and even when reflecting on the companies I joined and why, right? A lot of reflection to find these patterns, but it's just like a big ambition, something they see that other people don't see, and like some new thing that wasn't kind of possible before. Like there's a bunch of sub things we got to get to conviction around, but at a high level, those are like the three areas that seem to be a common thread in anything that I get excited about. And so they had this ambition to make programming accessible to all and basically give superpowers to non-developers. Context, I was working in a company called Hired, which we believed we could train and we can help more engineers be hired in the world. And they were telling me the opposite. The world will not produce enough engineers. And I was like, this is just like so opposite to the boot camps that were being created, generals. There was so much in 2016, like so much around like the world just is going to need to produce all these engineers. And they were like, the world's not going to be able to. And that captured my imagination. And they were like, look, what the black terminal is to a developer, we're engineers. We believe the spreadsheet. And what do you think? You were a banker. The spreadsheet is to a non-developer. And we're going to connect that to the internet for the first time. And I was like, whoa, that's so, and give these superpowers, like, and then maybe because I was an analyst, I'm like monkey business, like doing all these like models that I used to have to do. Like you felt like you were a developer, but you weren't. Um, uh, and they were saying that like we could give these same powers that we believe we have to like an audience like you to automate all sorts of things, like who knows, in the enterprise. And they were telling me, what went over my head at the time, that there is a new way of doing this called low code, no code to like do it. And on a high level, that's what got me there. I have like these 7 questions inspired by the 0 to 1 Peter Thiel book that I have to get answers to on every investment that I make. And one of them is a defensibility question. And when I asked that question, like, well, and the way I frame it, reflecting on my Uber experience, was like, what's like the strategic asset you think you're sitting on that in aggregate on that asset, there's a lot of value that would accrue, and it would be kind of hard for others to compete at some point in the journey. Their answer verbatim was, we're building a marketplace of API functions that can instantly run. And you can instantly call them. And maybe being a marketplace guy from both Uber and Hired, like light bulbs went off in my mind around like, well, if you build the largest API marketplace in the internet, like there's crazy network effect. And like, it will be hard for anyone else to compete. And that's probably the part that has stayed the most true through the entire journey. Today, it's a marketplace of data providers, maybe not called API functions, but they're data providers that give access to users of Clay to basically enrich anything they want to on the internet. And that flywheel has started to spin very, very fast. And while folks might view it as an AI sales company today, that's just a layer on top and an accelerant that has given, in the concept of these superpowers that they believe that they were creating. Well, now we have a new technology that helps you give them some superpowers. And so, you know, there is still a low code, no code function of it, but there's now like AI that can, whether it be agentic work or AI research work, that like that can do a lot of the work for you, but on this foundation of a marketplace of data providers. And so um, while I invested in something very big, bold, and broad, um, it took years to find the right uh, niche to go after. And to my earlier point around where I think founders tend to find success, even our own adventure, like I think of us as a business, you got to find a niche to start. The ones that work the best are the ones that happen to be unique to the founder, where there's some unfair advantage, or it solves one of their pain points and their problem. Just like it just happens to be their own, right? Like if I think about Uber at limos or Facebook at colleges, like those are amazing niches and wedges into these big businesses. But I think they were just solving their own desires. Travis and Garrett just wanted to get limousines, like for their own personal interest. Like it turned out to be an amazing wedge into their ambition. Me with Maple, one day we will be saying Maple is one of the best venture capital firms in the world. We'll be started in this niche that happened to be unique to me. And something I saw that other people didn't, that just served my unfair advantage. Clay got success by this go-to-market narrative wedge. And when I reflect on it, like the founders didn't have a go-to-market bone in their body. And so they were solving, using their own product, their own need, their own problem, their own pain. And it turned out that that was the right wedge to like wedge into something that we believe can be even bigger than just the go-to-market engine that they've built today. And so that's a little bit about the early, conviction that it takes time, it takes a lot, that was a 2017 hour. Okay.
That's insane, right? When you think 2017 and you think about today, right? So, when you think about making any investments today in AI, like where are we? Are we still in the inning of AI investing where there's tons of opportunity ahead? Do you think that we're maturing, or do you think we've saturated, or is it just game over? It's overhyped. There's no need to invest in the space now.
I'm pulling up a tweet that I recently shared that I think might be relevant. It's from Fred Wilson in his book back in 2015. He had said he said a friend had told him that nothing important has ever been built without irrational exuberance, meaning you need some of this mania, right, to cause investors to open up their pocketbook and finance the building of railroads, automobile, aerospace, like whatever. Today, AI. And so while it feels crazy, and maybe even the dot-com era felt crazy, we all know like great stuff come out of it, right? And you do have to play, to take the words out of Bill Gurley's mouth, the game on the field. And so I think there's an insane amount of opportunity, Showers. Oh my God, like this is a very rare moment. It's probably closer to the PC era, right? Like this is a new form of a computer, but with a more connected world than ever before around it, with like built-in distribution channels that like make the speed at which the change is going to be faster than ever before. And so this is like a venture capitalist's dream to be in business at this moment in time, because the current giants we all look up to were frankly created during a previous moment in time with an inflection point
Absolutely.
And so where it comes from, I'm not smart enough to tell you that, Charoo. Like I will, as we described, like I am not a thematic or industry sector focused investor. That I think if you're smart enough to know where those are, then you should be the founder. My job is to follow the minds of these founders, and they has historically carried these investors into the promised land. what I do know is that it usually happens on, there are patterns. It happens on the edges. When you talk about industries, like there's edges of industries where like maybe the winners end up winning that industry, right? Because we're in the business of exceptions. So it's not going to be super clear to anyone in any given space, sector, industry that like that is the winner. It just can't be by definition in the business that we're in. So I constantly think about that. I look back to those previous eras and like I realized that the last movers won, not the first movers. So like I think about that, right? And so um I think about that almost everyone on stage at these giant companies have these stories where everyone said no in the earliest stages. Like everyone said no. OpenAI, 2015, 20, like everyone said no. Everyone said no. And that warms my heart because I don't think we're necessarily like in these competitive deals or processes at the early stages if you're working on something and backing something that can be truly transformational and enduring at the stage we talked about that we play in. And so that warms my heart that like the pockets that I believe I'm uncovering with my thesis is generally overlooked and underestimated. And that pattern has produced some of the biggest winners in any category. So I just stay focused on that.
Yeah,
Um, I think the framework I have allows me to just give a first principles lens to any idea.
totally.
Um, and again, when you're at the early stages, I think that's the kind of lens and mindset that's best to have versus going deep in any one particular area. Um, And then as you have wins, like Uber early for me in one era, now Clay in the next era, and a few others that I think are budding in the portfolio. Not that any success is created equal, but you start to see the patterns that emerge that help you identify, give you clout and access to even a greater pool, so that our job is we got to see enough of these things. Um,
Yeah.
and and so I'm very grateful to be in a position where seeing all of the AI application, stuff. We may make them infra stuff too, but and I don't know like where. Sure, there's a narrative that like generally some of the biggest companies in the world are application layer companies, but like Amazon is also an infra company, but
Yeah.
like
Well,
so
over time.
over time, right?
Yeah.
So I and some of the big companies are hardware oriented companies and software. So I don't shy away
Yeah.
from like any of it to say that, oh, one layer or one area is going to derive the most value. It's just who knows? Who knows? What we do know, and that gets me excited for the work we do. The TAMs are going to be bigger than we ever could have imagined.
Mm,
2010, 2011, I don't think we could have imagined Uber at 150 billion. I'm sorry.
yeah.
Just like
Yeah.
you just couldn't imagine it as a limousine service, like the stage for investing in.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
so while tough times with liquidity right now or the crunch and all of that, we're investing in a 10-year horizon and we just cannot fathom what the TAMs will look like
I
in
agree.
2035.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we're creating opportunity that wasn't there before.
With a tech, with something that didn't exist before. And
Exactly.
yeah.
Which is exciting. So, in as you think about this unique time, though, and you particularly focused on the application layer, do you, from a first principles standpoint or not, pay attention to at the super early stage, knowing that you're betting something that's highly transformative and it in itself will transform because pivots, right? Do you at all think about or worry about the lack of moat at that time if they're leveraging existing foundational models to create the value that they're trying to create or not? Because you're like the application layer is the value and what's below it doesn't matter.
No, 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 no. Have we read a book, Charoo's, called The Seven Powers?
No.
Oh. Man,
Bring it. Bring it.
I just believe the book called Seven Powers, Hamilton Helmer. I think it should be taught in every business school. But um, there's a podcast, Acquired, the podcast, I'm sure you're
Yeah.
familiar with. At the end of their analysis, they talk through the 7 powers that these companies either have or don't have. I deeply believe these things stand the test of time.
Wow.
So they are, to bring it out. So one
Okay.
is,
Scale economies.
network
Net.
effects, scale economies, switching costs, counter positioning, cornered resource, branding, process power. What's amazing about that book too is that there are different of these powers that are associated with the stage of the company. Like the founder saying we're going to win on brand, and it's an early stage start. Like, come on, brand is
That's
built over time.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't care how great your company is, right? It's just that's the last stage of defensibility. Process power as well. You have creating a process. You have no systems in place that like one can not copy because you've just been doing it over time, right? And so that's usually associated with the later stage. Counter positioning. Clay had this at the early stage where we're going up against, say, your Zoom infos, right, that are seat based, and all of a sudden this guy comes in with
Yeah.
like a usage based model. Like we don't actually care about any seats used. Clay, it's not something we care about, and like that just is really hard to compete against. And
Yeah.
so that's an example of something really early that I might look for in hearing how the founder's thinking about the strategy of the business. Of course, we talked about network effects. I think, you know, something that people don't realize with network effects is they usually start off as a nice to have. This idea that you got to we diligence with customers. They're a really big pain point here. Not with network effect businesses. They start like people didn't need to get a limousine. It was 50% more than a taxi. Like it was hard to get people to use it. Even in the demo niche that we like thought would use it, it was a nice to have. But with a flywheel business, as the flywheel spins and it gets faster and faster and faster, network effect business often moved from nice to have to must have. And so again, just having that insight has helped me underwrite some of these companies that they could have it. Obviously, these are just ideas, but I love to bounce those ideas of off of founders. And so from a moat perspective, when you ask that specifically, um, 7 powers is one of my go-tos of like, what cornered resource is another. Sometimes cornered resource is just pure talent. Like this talent, literally, there's no one like this person on the planet that could go produce this. So like, I'm writing the check. That could, sometimes it shows up as IP at some point in their journey as well. Switching costs based on like, how in the weeds your product or service gets into a business, maybe more on the B2B side. And so I just think those things will stand the test of time, AI or not. And this is actually where in this phase of technology where we're have tools to automate all the technical pieces, I do wonder taste, strategy, operations, execution start to be the competitive advantages more so than, oh, you just don't have the technical people to create this. Like I have a company that's an AI software engineer. Like they're just gonna like the AI is gonna write the code. Do I really need someone that has that particular skill set now? And this is kind of why I'm leaning into the HBS grads. And some of them are technical, but I think like that layer, which in the last era might have been deprioritized because you really focus on people who could build the stuff because there was just a whole set of people that could only build it. Now AIs will build it. It's strategy. It's taste. It's going to come down to some of those. They're not softer areas. I think strategy is like a hardcore skill set. Like you do not win in business in this sport like without deeply thinking about strategy and when to turn right, when to turn left, and what leveraging what you think you're sitting on. And that might not necessarily be a technical, it might not show up as a technical moat or competitive advantage as it was in the past. Because I think if you deeply look at the biggest companies in the world, it probably came down to taste, strategy, even operations,
Yes.
than just
Yeah.
like the technical thing they built.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. There is so many parallels to previous, tech booms, right? The cloud era, the launch of the App Store, that remind me of this. This question came up then too, right?
Yes, of
And the
course.
same answer came up, right? Solve a actual high value problem that matters to the customer. Do it well. Think about the future. Be strategic, right? Execute on it. We always early days we always used to say like, ideas are nothing, but execution is everything. But now I do think there's a little shift there too, because I do think the idea does matter, and I think the idea is rooted in strategy. I think
Correct.
the idea is rooted in unique insight
Correct.
and taste, and it
Correct.
has to show up in, the expectations of the users are so high. This has to show up in a tasteful way that's easy to use. If there's any friction, we're gone. So, like, it's the same things, but I think at a higher bar, a different bar than before.
And this is why the 0 to 1 framework to me stands the test of time.
Yeah.
I'm like surprised more people don't leverage it. Now I've made it my own, but what's the 10x thing that you're solving? What's the why now? But I've broken that down to tech, economic, and culture. What's the monopoly? Like you got to own a niche to matter to a smaller audience first, than like a large audience out of the gate. What's the distribution? What are some creative thoughts of how you're going to distribute this thing, right? What's the defensibility? We talked through that with the clay example. And beyond the team, which is one, which I'm happy to share a framework that I use to think through that. But like lastly, to your point, like what do you believe there are other people do not believe as it relates to this opportunity? Because if it's not, if it's consent, like if I go, I tell founders, I'm going to go talk for 10 people that are related to this area in the space that are smarter than me in this area. And I want neither of them to like disagree with you. That's how I know you actually have a
Mm,
belief that other people don't have. So I will
mm,
share and I often go to the like downstream capital. Now you and I can call anyone we want in the industry. And it's interesting to help me think through the downstream opportunities, but I'm actually looking for the signals where they don't see it,
yeah.
where they're like, dude, I don't agree. And I'm like, because if you did, you probably would have already invested in something and it would have been consensus. So that was helpful that you kind of disagree with this point. And that is a checkpoint for me with testing whether the founder's belief is truly not, that people don't see it yet. And again, it reflects to like how I lived the journey through my operation journey of when I was at these companies. People didn't get it. People didn't see it. And I was
Yeah.
constantly like trying to sell and convince. And so I'm just looking for that same thing with the founders that I partner with. Yeah.
How do you get them over the line then if they're doing something so contrary? How do you get them over the line to the next funder?
That comes down to obviously
Traction.
the founder, the founder, with their superpower is making something happen that most
Yeah.
people didn't think could happen.
Yeah. Proving
Yeah,
it.
yes. And I think the answer to that question, what I guide my founders to think through is our job is to show the next funders something they've never seen before.
Yeah. Totally. Yes.
That's
Yeah.
all we're looking for. So there's no magical ARR number. Not going to
Yeah.
tell you to get to that number. We've left that era. I'm
Yeah.
really
Agreed.
happy we've left that era. So we
But have
give.
we? I feel like that's still coming up.
No, I think people are forcing it to come up, but there was like funders that would just back things in a spreadsheet if it hit a certain milestone, and it was just like guaranteed to go up and to the right. No, there's seed, there's Series A, there's B rounds done with companies with zero ARR,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
that we've let like so there takes some intellectual honesty and capacity to and no patterns for you to really try to uncover what could be great. which I think is venture capital, and I'm excited that we entered that phase again. And the only common thread amongst any of them that get funded, or the best ones in my opinion, are the ones where like, whoa, I've never seen that before. And it could show up in all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
It could show up in an NPS. It could show up in the product experience. It could show up with the numbers. Sure, the error. Like it could show. I'm not going to give you the prescription of how it shows up, but our job, if you are working on something really special, that is a big ambition with a unique insight that wasn't possible before, the output of that should be something we've never seen before. And at some point it will arise.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we're doing. Yeah.
100%. Okay. So then what is what's a belief that you hold about AI that you think most people would disagree with?
At the moment, it's the question you asked, which is there are no moats. It can be copied. Like, you fund something today and like you're out of business tomorrow. If you're applying these 7 powers, one of them, like if you're thinking through taste and strategy, like that's not true. There are moats. And it is the companies with those moats that deeply thought through them that will win. And I take the clay example. A lot of people are currently believing and thinking they can build a faster clay, an easier clay.
Yeah.
It's quite hard to set up actually. And they're just like not seeing the network effect at the base layer. They're not seeing it. And it's spinning relatively fast, but it's going to spin faster over time. And that piece, no one's talking about. Like no one talks about the moat piece in any of these applications. Because what's getting the headlines are the top line figures, which are growing at paces we've never witnessed before. And that's why they're getting funded, to my earlier point. But the ones that will win are the ones that, like, there's lots of different moats. Like, and the 7 powers are just, it's like a very clear, widely held example and case study of granted, it documents at a previous era. As you mentioned, those of that era could be comped to this era too. And the ones that end up being standing, I think they do a deep dive into Netflix in the book, and it's just fascinating to learn, like, why did Netflix like exist and stand the test of time, right? And so there's some awesome lessons learned there. So that would probably be the one that comes to mind. That like there actually are moats. You just have to look deeper.
Do you believe that we are coming to a future where not only are companies growing faster than ever before and TAMs are expanding bigger than ever, but that the teams are going to continuously get smaller and we will end up with the 1 or 2 pizza person billion-dollar company?
While I do subscribe to this idea, I also don't at the moment.
And here we go. Never went.
And the reason is I have a framework to think about. The best companies in the world end up having 3 profiles of founders, but you need all 3 in order to actually build a very large and enduring business.
Okay. And they are?
Inventors, builders, and operators. And when I think about, to just bring the point home, when I think about building a company, think about it in a 5-step process, from 0 to 5, 5 being like the vision's realized, 0 being like the prototype. Inventors' superpowers are around the prototype and are around actually bringing that future from a technical perspective to light, to fruition. Builders, and then when I mean builders, I mean company builders, are really good at going from 0 to 1, getting you to step 1 in a unique way. And I think their superpower is capturing your imagination of what step 5 could be, because often step 5 isn't linear to where step 1 is. And they're really good at the ambition to capture your imagination. And then operators are really good at steps 2, 3, and 4. And so in my opinion, you don't get to step 5 from 0 without all 3. The truth, though, is that 50% of the battle of building anything enduring is the talent you got to track, which I will address to your point on the AI in a second, on why I kind of hold these beliefs, contrarian beliefs I hold in parallel together in my head, believing yes to that one-person $1 billion company, but also no. We're attracted to people like ourselves. So if you're an inventor starting a company, I'm going to generally see a lot of other inventors. And the tricky was that they could build some awesome stuff, but if you can't go to the right step 1, you might think you're at a step 1, but that step, it's like, are you the right step 1 to wedge you into the process, to building to step 5? And then operators dance around 0 to 1 because that's not their superpower. So they skip it, and they're like really great on this execution stuff. And so company builders also attract people like themselves. So you got a bunch of people who go from 0 to 1, right? But I found something unique with the company builders where, because they aren't technically the person that could create the prototype themselves in a prior era, like they can give this lane they attract the inventor type to their journey, because they're like, look, I can introduce it. You go, here's your lane. They're also not the best operators either. And so they're like, here's your lane. And I found that, and to bring this home, like I think Larry Page is a builder, Sergey Brin is an inventor, and an Eric Schmidt is a operator. You don't get to Google it out all 3. Sometimes they come at different parts of the journey. Take like a Travis Kalanick is a company builder, a Garrett Camp is an inventor, and Adara, right, is a operator. They just came at different points in time. And so I believe this framework, it both informs how I invest and the type of architect that I'm looking for. But to your point on what AI could enable, could AI enable an automated operator and an automated inventor?
Right.
Where you might not need those archetypes to get you to these other stages. And that's where it messes with my framework.
Yeah.
Because it might look on the outside as a team of 1, but you actually built this team. They just came in a different form factor.
Yeah.
Right. There's like an AI inventor, if you will, or an AI operator, if you will, that like come maybe in the form of services and like empower you to go build from 0 to step 5, like build your business. And so that's why I struggle with it at the moment, where maybe that could be true if you can automate those other roles in the world that you fully can't. Then I think you need the people. You just might not need as many people. Yeah.
I think, I've been coming right now. I'm at the ladder where you might not need as many people after that 0 to 1 stage.
Right.
Where, there's so many companies with fewer engineers getting 10x more done. And even the idea of automating all these work processes, whether it's HR or marketing or even go to market with Clay, right? That these things just mean more efficient companies. But I'm still at the place where the starting lineup, I don't know how much of that will be automated just yet, because we need to invent something new, right? And I think AI can be a companion, but I'm not ready to replace the inventor. Okay, nice. We're gonna wrap on this last question. We're totally over time. What would you tell your past self before you wrote that first check in that first company, whatever that company was?
That you will see success in 10 years. You'll see inklings of it in year 7. Anything before, crapshoot. Not that changes your conviction and the journey that I've joined and the sales motion that I've gone on this boat with them to go convince the world of what we are going to go change and do. Nothing changes there. And my motive, my enthusiasm and conviction around that, nothing changes. But you just won't know when you write that check of whether will endure and make the impact you hope it can when you first write that check. You won't really know much until you're 7. And then you won't know whether it's successful until you're 10. And I wish I appreciated that. I mean, I was a student of the craft, and I think I heard that, but until you live it, and now I have it with clay in year 7, I'm like, oh, or year 8. Yeah. Like, it's like, oh, okay, that is true. There's something natural about year 7 to 10 in venture capital in this sport that we play.
Yeah. And it is absolutely a competitive sport that will only build with time. And so thank you for that insight. This was so fun, Andre.
Absolutely. Same here. Thank you so much. Loved your question. I hope your audience enjoyed it. It was lots of stuff to get my mind thinking as well. So appreciate the opportunity.
No, likewise. It's my favorite thing to spend time with people from the True North. We are the best. And I hope we get to invest together. So
yes, let's
thank
do
you
it.
for coming on the show.
Thank you.
All right. Welcome back. That was another great episode. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. So typically, I listen to the episode as soon as we record it, take some time to reflect, do some thinking, do some writing, and share back my takeaways. Many of you have said how much you enjoy the takeaways, which I appreciate because this is why I'm doing this. I'm doing this to take the time to think and reflect and have my own thoughts about what other people are saying. So it's the real reason for doing all this is to have some takeaways. However, I'm going to change the format of how I share my takeaways. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is I want to hear from you. I love recording my thoughts, but it's also great to hear what you all think, the listeners. So whether you're an angel investor, venture capitalist, or a founder, I want to hear your thoughts too. If you agree or disagree or have new thoughts or have questions, I'd love to hear what those questions might be. So that's one reason is I want to be in conversation. I want to be in community with all of you listeners. The second reason is things are changing in a good way for me, which is going to make it harder for me to take the time out to come back on to record. It's going to be much easier for me to spend time writing and thinking and putting that out via our newsletter. And I'll share more about why things are going to get busy in the next week or 2, but it's all good stuff. And I'm super excited to let you all know. So with that, if you have not joined the newsletter, and I know some of you already have, thank you for that, please join. And once you do join, you'll only get messages after every episode, nothing else. But I invite you to share your thoughts with me or reflections, or even just like, let me know if that was a good or a bad episode. I just want to hear from you all. I want to be in better connection with my community. So with that, go to firstfunderspod.com and drop your name in the newsletter. I might have to manually add you because I know some of you listeners out there already, but please do that. And would love to hear what you think. Thank you again. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of this community. And we'll see ya next time. Ciao.